Well, hello, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to our first backup recovery office hours session for 2023. My name is Timothy Chen, and I'm with the Oracle Backup Recovery Technologies Product Management team. My team member, Marco Calmasini, is also here and will be presenting with me today as well. In today's session, we're going to review highlights from 2022, including some of the more recent customer use cases that we've seen using our technologies. We do have the Q&A function, so please ask your questions on that. And we'll also be pasting various links to resources along the way. So please be on the lookout for that too in your chat box. All right. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to cover our portfolio today, and these are the technologies from the Recovery Appliance, our upcoming recovery service, database backup cloud service, Oracle Secure Backup. We'll look at a summary of the entire portfolio and how the pieces work together, and then we'll finally end with a Q&A along with some additional resources for our product set. So starting with zero data loss recovery appliance. So, obviously we've discussed this in prior sessions, and hopefully you are aware of our engineered system that we designed for Oracle database protection. We continue to see some nice adoption across different regions, across different industries, and some of the key technology areas that we address are listed here. And just so that we level set and people can kind of get a general understanding who are not familiar, the system was designed for resilient recovery, and that is using very Oracle integrated aware transaction protection technology. So instead of relying on traditional backup strategies, we can protect changes in transactions as they occur in real time. So in a sense, giving you zero data loss protection. We'll also feature recovery validation of the backups themselves. So not only to ensure that the files are written, but that they can be restored and recovered. And that requires, again, an Oracle database awareness of the files, what they constitute, and the recovery restore process, as I mentioned, on those files. Second point here is about reducing infrastructure utilization, which is a big topic for customers, especially with large databases or large numbers of databases, where taking backups, especially full backups, can have a major impact on the production servers and make it difficult to schedule, right, these full backups. And in this recovery appliance, we eliminated the need for taking regular full backups and made it an incremental forever strategy. And we do that through some specialized technology we call virtual fulls, which allow the incrementals forever to produce a new virtual full backup that can be used for restore purposes at any time. And that is all handled by the appliance. All right. In addition to the incremental forever, the backups are also compressed by the system. So not only do you get a dramatic reduction of backup storage used because of incremental forever, you also get an additional 2x plus compression on top of that. So quite a bit of reduction compared to general purpose backup storage appliances. This obviously dramatically reduces and can eliminate the production overhead for taking backups as well. Last point here is something that I think all of us are aware of, have seen the news, but really making this a top sort of value of the product from a technical standpoint, and that is defending and recovering from ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks, cybersecurity that makes the headlines, and we certainly are very aware of that, and we've made available various functionality to be able to defend and to be able to effectively recover from these types of attacks. So no longer traditional HADR outages or media corruptions, which are isolated, but ransomware attacks can happen anywhere and they can go everywhere, right? And so in this respect, fast database restores, the concept of immutable and air gap backups becomes very important. And then obviously being able to monitor the databases and their protection health in real time is especially important because these attacks can happen very quickly, and you want to have much more immediate awareness of any compromise or any kind of recovery issue with those backups. So as a general architecture overview, three things that are shown here for the recovery appliance starts with our transaction protection, making sure the backups are resilient, and then, as I mentioned, the Cyber Vault solution architecture that we have in light of the cybersecurity and ransomware concerns. So if you look at this architecture, you can see that the recovery appliance supports any database versions, 12C to 21C, that's supported on any platform that the database supports. We support this real-time protection, as I mentioned. That's a transaction protection through real-time reduced shipping, and the ARM and incremental forever model, which creates what we call the virtual full backups. So these backups, as I mentioned, can be made immutable on the system. We'll talk just a little bit more about what that means by definition, and offering fast data recovery through dedicated 100 gig aggregate network connectivity for ingest and restore performance. And we do that again with zero data loss because we do capture all that transactional information in real time and create the archive log backups that are used for that recovery process. On the right side, you can now see replication coming into the picture. Replication is our foundation capability to support disaster recovery, to create essentially another copy of the backup in another appliance, potentially in another location. But we also use replication as a means to synchronize a recovery appliance in a cyber vault. And so the cyber vault concept is really, I would say a network configuration and a location which is physically isolated from the production environments. The idea of a cyber vault is, replication of backups can go in at random times, but no other access is possible into or out of that vault. Extremely secure location, typically separate from a DR location because a DR location is kept in sync with the production and must have a constant network connectivity to be able to do that. In the case of a vault, it's not a 100% available network access. And as I mentioned, it's only open for periodic synchronizations from the production side. The other means to get a copy of your backup for, to better protect against cyber and ransomware type of attacks is to archive a backup copy on some regular basis to our Oracle Cloud Storage. So Oracle Cloud Storage is a perfect place to put backups. It's cost effective. You can use those backups to restore to an Oracle Cloud database, or you can choose to restore those directly to an on-premise database, right? These are backups that are used that are RMAN format, so they can be used by any RMAN client to be able to do restores. For on-premises archival use, we do support our ZFS storage as an on-premise target configured with the recovery appliance so that you can also use this as a second tier. And the archiving facility also allows you to do longer term retention, right? Instead of, versus having shorter term retention, say an amount of days on your production or cyber vault recovery appliances, you might have retention of months or years, for various purposes, for regulation, for compliance, on the second tier storage. So that's the other good use case for these devices. Now, across our entire recovery appliance ecosystem, we strongly recommend using TDE on the databases. TDE is our sort of gold standard for database encryption, right? It's source database encryption. Backups you take of TD databases are supported with a recovery appliance for incremental forever strategies. So you do get some great efficiencies continuing with TD backups, and the TD data remains encrypted on the recovery appliance. As it gets replicated, as it archives to cloud storage, that encrypted data is never decrypted or identifiable by any component in this ecosystem. The only way that the encrypted data can be viewed is by the DBA, who has access to the keys, right, for the TD side. And so they will be able to, they and they only will be able to restore and be able to then open the database for use. So TD is extremely important, as I mentioned, and it's has been around for many years, but especially for cyber security purposes, it really gives you that layer of defense, so that in case you have a compromise on the database, if the attacker does not have the keys, they can't really make any gainful use of the data itself, right? And the second point here is recovery validation. And so that means that across this entire ecosystem, that the backups themselves are validated for recovery, Oracle recovery specifically. So anytime a backup data is read for any purposes in this life cycle, if you will, into the, say the local appliance, as it's read for validation on the appliance itself, as it's read before it's replicated or read before it's archived to cloud storage, a validation process happens on all the data as part of those backups. And so you get very immediate response and awareness of any kind of malignment or corruption or any kind of foreign introduction into those backup in data itself. So two things I want to focus on here is the immutable backup and Cyber Vault, since those are sort of more recent themes that we've seen in our customer space and technologies that we've been working on. So the idea here of immutable backups, as I mentioned, for compliance purposes, but also for ransomware protection. The definition that we're using here is that immutable backups cannot be deleted or altered until a predefined retention for them has expired. So this means that you might have a retention just for operational backup recovery. We call that a recovery window goal for your systems. And then within that recovery window goal, you have a immutable backup period, meaning backups for 7 days, for example, out of the 30-day recovery window goal must be made immutable, cannot be altered, deleted, or modified, right? So that is kind of our definition for immutable backups. When you do turn on this setting in our system, the parameter you use is called recovery window compliance in our protection policy. And this will block external users from deleting backups, such as an RMN delete command or any kind of command that involves deletion or modification of the backup or the backup metadata itself, right? And with that setting enabled, we guarantee, assuming there is sufficient space in the system, that these backups will be retained for that compliance window, right, that you specify. And even if you change the retention policy for that compliance window, say from 7 days, you change it to 3 days, the system will not automatically start deleting backups older than 3 days. It actually still retains under immutability those 7 days worth of backups. Any new backups coming in after the change is made will be adhering to the new window, but not any of the existing backups. So we strictly internally even ensure that nothing can be deleted, regardless of any changes to the policy or retention settings there. Along with doing immutable backups, we also support disabling of the SSH, RASys, and root access into the box. These are critical access control capabilities, because if you have immutable backups, you want to make sure that the users who are trying to get there have a very hard time to be able to even access, right, and administrative operations and do anything underneath the hood, if you will, on the system. And so we offer this capability where in order to get system level access to the box, you must pass through a quorum-based user authentication. That means two or more administrators of the system must approve in order for system level root access, for example, to be granted. And you might need to do this for support purposes, for maintenance purposes, for exception purposes. You might need that access, but normally you would, in the day-to-day, you would not need that access. So we've locked that down. We've also introduced this concept of named administrators, which only have access to the publicly documented commands for the appliance. We try to make this, again, very tightly controlled, both for the storage on the immutable backups and also on the access side to get to the appliance itself. Last thing I want to mention is important because it's an architecture feature of our system, is that the backups that are sent to the recovery appliance, as I mentioned, we store them in a proprietary virtual full backup format. These are blocks, that we store on our system, Oracle data file blocks, and they're in a very specific format for our purposes. They're not on a general purpose file system that you might be using today for your backups. So even if a user was able to go in and look at this block pool that we have, it would be virtually impossible to be able to fashion any kind of, usable data or identifiable data by any stretch, because a data file's blocks might be spread across various data files that we keep in our system for the virtual full backups, right? So in order to do any kind of restore operation, you have to be an authorized RMAN user, what we call VPC user of the appliance. And so when you restore it, you actually don't see any of the backup pieces that you might see with RMAN, right? When you back up to a file system or NFS location, you simply do the restore, and the recovery appliance fashions a new physical full backup out of the virtual full, and it comes back to the RMAN session as a normal full backup, which is then restored by RMAN and into data files on the database storage side. So we try to make this very closed in a sense of security access, and to ensure that minimal access is needed to use this system. So along with the immutable backups theme, which we've seen, like I said, across many customers and industries, we were approached about this SEC regulation, which essentially all of our banking customers required for compliance. And this really, gave us much more impetus and attention that functionality and capabilities to support these kinds of regulations are not just nice to have, but they're really becoming mandatory now. And so the SEC 17A4F regulation has been around in the banking industry for a while. It started with tape and older media for storage purposes for backups, but it's evolved over the years as disk technologies have become much more popular. And so instead of having tape-based immutability on the hardware itself, we're now moving to software-based controls on disks themselves. So disk obviously is read-write, and so now software is in charge of these immutability features. So you can see the primary requirements here. And last year, we actually did complete an assessment and report for this regulation. And so if you want to look at a copy of this report, you can download this link. We can put this in the chat too. So you can just get the link there. But it's very comprehensive. Take a look, especially if you're in the financial services industry or any other regulated industry. You'll see that a lot of the requirements are common, in terms of their intent, I would say. And so you can see how our system really honors and satisfies those requirements. And so we've seen quite a bit of popularity in those regulations recently. Before I move to the customer use cases, just want to mention a few key updates for Enterprise Manager side as well. This is 13.5 version that we had introduced for Recovery Appliance. So named users management that I mentioned, we now tightly control access to the system and can disable root and RA-sys and SSH access. So same thing with EM. EM can also offer creation of these users now with the new RA user model. And you can use these users in the EM console, just like you did today with your RA-sys users today, right? So now you can grant them more specific privs, and the administrator user has access to all the APIs and all the functions to do change in management on the system. The monitor user is strictly read-only to be able to view and look at screens in EM, but not to actually change or modify anything. And then the protected DBBCS user role is, again, for your database user who's going to run RMAN, right, to do the backup and restore. So these three types of users are integrated now with EM. Immutable backup support, both for the recovery window compliance and for what we call compliance hold, when you need to have an existing backup that's locked for a specific time period for legal purposes or other forensics purposes. You can also do this through Enterprise Manager. Also introduced was an administrator API execution history monitoring. So you can see a log of all the admin APIs that were run. And you can do this for auditing purposes, right? For reporting, for daily activity, status, and so forth. It makes it very easy to see what has been done on the system, both from a login perspective and who's logged in, and for the execution of those APIs. Recovery Appliance does support TLS, that's in-transit encryption for backups and replication, and the Enterprise Manager 13.5 now supports that out of the box as well for TLS. And finally, new REST APIs were introduced for common administrator operations. So what this means is if you have a management tool, and a lot of cloud-based environments have this sort of REST-controlled management tools, and with EM installed and discovered both the Recovery Appliance and the database, it will make available these new REST APIs that you can execute. So instead of having to go through the UI, there are a complementary set of APIs that you can run as well to script or to automate these admin operations. All right, let's move on to highlights of some customer use cases. The first one I mentioned is New York Stock Exchange. They have been a long-standing user of Recovery Appliance for some years. They presented with us at Oracle Cloud World just this past year. The reason I highlight them is because of their need to modernize cyber protection and recovery. They had, prior to Recovery Appliance, a legacy backup solution which didn't accommodate their loads. You can see that their databases volume based on applications is quite large, right? 100, 200 terabyte style databases, 4 petabytes plus overall database volume. So their full backup kind of based storage solution just wasn't able to keep up. And so they moved to Recovery Appliance because of the incremental forever and recovery benefits. So they did see that. They saw quite a bit of improvement, a 50x improvement in backup performance because they're doing incremental forever now, and 5x faster RTOs over their legacy solution. That was in place right when they deployed Recovery Appliance, and over time they've implemented TDE on their databases, again for best practices for security, and again for modernization of cyber protection. And those TDE backups continue to benefit from incremental forever, so they still get some great advantages for the backup storage efficiencies. And last point here on the left is also they implemented a multi-level role management and approval. So they they're in the process of implementing named administrators, monitor users, and also disabling root access to the box and having quorum requirement, a quorum approval requirement for that access. So they saw the value, right? Immediately saw value from a security standpoint as well, not just the backup recovery operational improvement, but also from a security standpoint. And we'll also put the link of this presentation in the chat of what they did at Cloud. Our next use case is a global bank that has deployed over 50 recovery appliances. Their initial challenges were just in backup times, recovery times. Later on, they also were trying to eliminate exposure to regulatory compliance and ransomware risks, right? They had, especially as a leading global bank, they needed to comply with the SEC regulation, and they also needed to prove to the auditors and to their assessment teams that the backups were in fact immutable and reported as such, right? Officially reported that way across their very large estate, over 15,000 Oracle databases that they support on the recovery appliances they have. When they put in recovery appliance, they immediately saw great benefits, faster backups and restore, 4x faster in many cases. They were able to eliminate their previous tier 1 backup storage, which they use as staging to get to their secondary media for longer term retention. So that yielded many $1 million worth of savings over the 5 years plus that they've been using recovery appliance now. And they also have this new vault location. You can see here, it's essentially a one-way replicated site so that you have backups from any of those local recovery appliances copied to the vault. And then that copy on vault is then archived to tape. So this is all, again, coordinated by recovery appliance policies, centrally managed. So you can see the status of the local backups, the status of the vault backups, and of the tape backups from one place. And they also needed HA and failover capabilities between their local recovery appliance. So similar to the previous customer, they also implemented multiple recovery appliances and a configuration for HA here. So any of their clients can fail over to other RAs if needed. Okay. The last use case here is a major healthcare company, which has been using ZDLRA for a while. And they've recently, in the last year, implemented archive to immutable ZFS and OCI storage. So this, again, awareness of cybersecurity, ransomware risk, caused them to really take another look at extending really their recovery appliance solution for immutable backups. And what we can see here is that they have hundreds of critical Oracle databases. They use TDE, okay, on their databases themselves, and their need was to continue getting 0 to sub-second DB protection without obviously impacting production, and they also needed longer-term retention on secondary media, more cost-effective media. And so for this, they used ZFS, right? So when we talked about ZFS as being an on-prem archive destination, they were able to do this with recovery appliance. And from the ZFS, as you see in this diagram, you can also then copy to the public object cloud or object storage cloud and have the immutable policies specified there as well. So they have immutable copy on ZFS. They have also immutable copy on the cloud as well. To do this cloud operations, we require Oracle Key Vault to be used with recovery appliance. This allows the appliance to have a centralized key repository, as the recovery appliance itself does not keep keys. It should not actually keep any keys related to the backups or the databases. So we rely on OKV as our centralized repository, and that also holds the TDE keys from the database. So the database users have their own privs and access to get TDE keys, And the recovery appliance has this access to generate the backup encryption keys as it copies backups to ZFS and as it moves over to cloud storage as well. So next, we'll talk a little about our recent cloud developments. And so we'll start with the Zero Data Loss Autonomous Recovery Service. So we announced this service at Cloud World 2022. This is essentially a recovery appliance as an OCI service. So all the benefits and technologies integrated with the database available with the appliance is now available as an OCI service. We're currently in an internal limited availability period, soon to be customer limited availability, and we are planning to have GA in the near future as well for this service. But just so you get a good picture of just what this service looks like, it's in OCI and it supports OCI databases. So supporting specifically autonomous database dedicated, Exadata database service databases, and base database databases. So these are OCI database services, and they benefit with incremental forever backups. These are automated. So you go through the OCI cloud dashboard, just like you do today for creating these databases, and there'll be a new option for recovery service. And underneath, all that configuration is done, and we use incremental forever backups. You get all the benefits of compression of those backups, and they're encrypted. So here's a very important point to make, is that encrypted backups, that is TD encrypted backups, or if you specify backup encryption, when you take a backup with RMAN to the recovery appliance, once data is encrypted, it's virtually impossible to compress, right? That's just a sort of fact of life. That scrambled data, encrypted data, really can't gain more benefits from storage level compression features. What we've done in the recovery service, and also will be in an upcoming recovery appliance software release, is the ability to take TD encrypted data, decrypt the data while it's being processed on the database client, decrypt it, compress it, and then re-encrypt it before sending it out to the recovery appliance systems. So this gives you the benefits of retaining the encryption end-to-end, and also now getting significant savings by being able to compress that data. So this backups, this gives us quite a big advantage compared to any other backup storage that's available in the market. No other product in the market can do this because it simply doesn't know what database encryption is, and it cannot do the decryption, right? So recovery appliance service does support this underneath, and as I mentioned, it's planned to be released in the recovery appliance software in the future as well. The encryption keys are owned by the database. They're never stored with a backup, right? These are separate roles and duties here in our infrastructure. Talked about end-to-end encryption. Everything's validated, just like with the recovery appliance. And the control plane, right, is key here for orchestration of activities, for workflow management of backups and restore operations, for reporting of database health, just like you do today with recovery appliance through Enterprise Manager. You have a dashboard in OCI Cloud UI, which allows you to see the health of all those OCI databases, their recovery windows, their current level of protection for real-time transaction protection, the last complete backup, like all the sort of critical metrics, needed to report on the current recoverability health of the environment. Right. And we, like I said, have a specialized UI offered with this service to do set up policies and to do monitoring and management of backup and restore operations. Wanted just to finish this section up by talking to a customer that we're working with who started with on-prem a recovery appliance, an Exadata Cloud customer. And they started with this because they really needed the advantages of Recovery Appliance for, again, reducing backup windows and recovery time, and to get zero data loss protection. And they have hundreds of databases right in their area. This is a leading multinational retail wholesale company based in Europe, but has operations across the globe, right? Metro. And once they started with these on-prem solutions, over time in the last year, they've had to look at cloud solutions. That's kind of their corporate direction, and both for cost effectiveness purposes, but also with diversifying their infrastructure so that they're able to have much more universal access, if you will, through cloud as opposed to the on-prem data centers. And so they're moving to OCI Xdata database service for their production databases, and to use recovery service along with that, as you see. Their requirements here was to have a policy-based backup retention for a minimum of 14 days, 0 to sub-second protection without production impact, incremental forever backups, and also having cross-AD and cross-region recovery for HADR. That becomes important for these critical environments where you need to be able to do recovery in the event of any outage, both at a availability domain level or at a whole region level, to be able to restore databases to a clean environments, to new locations as quickly as possible. So they're working with us as an early adopter for recovery service. If you do have interest in the recovery service or any OCI related matters, please reach out to us through our session page. You can ask us questions. We can come back to you and contact you for further follow-up there. And some of the resources now available today, as I said, service is announced. We're going to be starting limited availability for customer use very shortly, and so you can take a look at some product demos here as well. Okay. And we'll put these links in the chat at the end as well. All right, I'll transition now to Marco to cover the rest of this presentation. Marco?
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So, short update on database backup cloud service and Oracle Secure Backup. A lot of work on both these products that during this year has been spent on things that will see the light in this year, in this calendar year, 2023. But the thing that were that are already available and we can talk about it on the database backup cloud service side, the support for immutable buckets, so object storage buckets that have retention policy defined in it that makes data or objects stored in the bucket immutable for a predefined period of time. It is initially, it's been initially released and officially documented as for the recovery appliance. So when the database backup cloud service is used when sending backups from an on-premises recovery appliance to the cloud. This was done to enable the complete compliance and regulation support for the whole life cycle of the data. Tim mentioned this earlier. Data can be made immutable on the recovery appliance, and in this way they can also continue to remain immutable for the required time when they are from the recovery appliance moved or offloaded to a cloud bucket. But this feature is also available for anyone using the latest library, not documented yet, will be soon. But it's just a parameter to add to the configuration file of the backup cloud module, and that will enable RMAN to basically use two buckets, because this is what happens. Normally, RMAN through the backup cloud module stores some temporary files during the backup in the bucket, and obviously when immutability is configured, that would not work because the data cannot be deleted at the end of the backup. So an additional bucket must be configured and used as a temporary bucket, and this can be done by just adding a parameter. So anyone using the latest library that is available out there, potentially can use this feature. This is important not only for compliance reasons, but also for ransomware protection, obviously. We have customers using this in the cloud already before the recovery service was available. Still now, most of the customers are still using object storage and the database backup service at a target. Some of them required ransomware protection, so backup stored in an immutable location, and this is how they could do it. On the Oracle Secure Backup front, a lot of work is still in progress on enabling OCI support, and by OCI support I mean making the Oracle Secure Backup product very well integrated with OCI to protect not databases but regular compute instances. It's part of this work, as I was saying, will see the light later this year. Today we developed and made available Ansible script to install agents in compute instances in OCI. They would work anywhere, obviously, at this point, but they are very useful for customers in OCI that must deploy agents from OSB to compute instances to protect file system data or file share services data that is mounted on compute instances. The Oracle Secure Backup has been improved also by improving resiliency through checksums when sending backups to target destination, especially important when sending backup to object storage. And reporting for database backup was also improved, adding more filters available for DBID, DB names, etc. Can you click, please, Tim, this slide? Okay. A little more details on what we're doing in OCI. I don't have a single customer use case or story to share here. I have 300 customers use story, and that's summarized here. So that's what we have today out there. It's more than 300 at this time. Different customers that are using OCI, so the deployed OSB in OCI to protect their compute instances. Customers using EBS, any type of backup, or the custom applications also in OCI that are using the OCI features to protect the databases, but they also needed to protect compute instances, application nodes, and those kind of data. And they're using OCI for that. They do have 6,500 clients total, around 5,000 are Linux clients, 1,500 are Windows, 6,500 full backups happening every weekend, 39,000 incremental backups per week during the weekdays. Around 10 petabytes of storage in OCI is today used by these customers using OSB. Coming soon, meaning should be in the next few weeks, OSB will be also made available in the marketplace. So going to the OCI marketplace, you can find an OSB image, and through the automation the OCI marketplace provides, when you click on Get Up, that is deployed. So a compute image is deployed in your tenancy in the compartment that you choose, and the Oracle Secure Backup admin server will be set up. That image will also include the Ansible scripts I was mentioning today, and those scripts can be easily customized if you want, but you can also use them as they are out of the box. You just fill up a host file where you specify the targets, and you just run them, and those will deploy the OSB clients and set them up as client in the OSB admin server. So the only additional thing to do at that point is configure your target bucket where you want your backups to go and the backup policies that you like, and you are good to go. Can you please click next, Tim? So yeah, we'll see now how the our portfolio, the backup and recovery technology portfolio changed with this latest additions. And so you may have seen the slides already, and then this is the new version if you want. So we start from this box here that represents in on-premises environments. Protected databases are on the right, any database, Oracle database running on any platform, and protected files, meaning just generic file system data here on the left. The foundation, if you want, is RMAN. It's the backup and recovery engine for the Oracle database. It's been out for 20 years, a little more now. And it's really the engine that controls all the backup and recovery operations for the Oracle database. And with that, just with coming with any Oracle database, you can manage your backup, sending backups to a local disk or to an NFS location. Then can you click next, please? Okay. The next step is the recovery appliance. Team spoke extensively about it. It's an engineered system. Arman can use it as a destination, and it's the best possible solution, providing all the features that were mentioned before: incremental forever, real-time transaction protection, validation, ransomware protection, etc. That was mentioned before. Can you click next, team? Okay. The recovery appliance is. Okay, you went one further, but it's okay. The recovery appliance can be the target, obviously, for on-premises database, and by on-premises database, that includes Exadata Cloud at Customer. And it's particularly interesting because it is integrated into the Cloud Console management to manage Exadata Cloud at Customer databases, the fact that you can send backup to an on-premises recovery appliance. So all the actual backup management part, scheduling, controlled backups, restore can be initiated to the console, is managed by the Exadata control plane. So there's no need for additional manual work to be done on the Exadata Cloud at Customer databases by using Arman directly. Everything is done through the automation. Can you please click next now? Okay. So this upper part, as you see, is the cloud part. The database backup cloud service is what I talked about a minute ago. You can use the database backup cloud service to send backup to the cloud for on-premises database directly through the database backup cloud module. Nothing else is needed. It can be used as a target to offload backups from a recovery appliance. Those can be just to extend your recovery window, or meaning that you keep your recovery window with the ability to restore to any point in time within that recovery window. Can also be used to send to the cloud archival backups, backup that must be kept for a very long period of time, and for which you don't require to be able to recover to any point in time. You only want to be able to recover to that point in time. I mean, things like end of the month full backup, end of the year backup that must be kept for 5 years, 10 years, and things like that. The database backup service and object storage is also used as a target for cloud databases, database cloud service, Exadata cloud service, ADB, etc., etc. Can you please click next? Okay. Oracle Secure Backup is the fourth member of the family. Oracle Secure Backup can backup both databases and file system data. When we talk in the cloud space, as we said, databases are managed through the database automation, etc. So it's mostly relevant for file system data. Can be used to backup file system from Exadata Cloud at Customer. Can be used to backup file system data from on-premises systems that are not even database systems, or from like Oracle Homes from the database that you have on-premises. You can also use to backup databases from on-premises anyway. Obviously, it's necessary to backup to tape. It can be used if you want to backup to the cloud, and also as an alternative to the database backup cloud service or the database backup cloud module. In this case, it would give you the ability to schedule automated policies so that you can stage backup, for example, on-premises on disk for a period of time, and then have OSB move those backup automatically based on your configuration and your policies to tape or to cloud. Can you please click next now, Tim? As I was mentioning, it can be used also, and it will be probably more and more used going forward in the future with some additional specific features that we are going to add as a tool to back up file system data, so non-database workloads in OCI. Can you click the last? Next, the OSB and OCI marketplace I just mentioned will be available in the next few weeks. And the last and the new addition to the family, the fifth member of the family, is the recovery service, which also was covered by Tim. It's a service that gives the same benefits that the recovery appliance provides for on-premises database. Again, incremental forever, real-time transaction protection and immutability and those kind of things for cloud databases and as a service. So no need to manage the recovery appliance. It's just a cloud service that you enabled customer already running in OCI with database cloud service, Exadata cloud service. We'll have the ability to just basically go to the database backup configuration and switch from object storage to a recovery service, and that's basically it. They will start using the recovery service. I think that's all. Can you click next? Oh, okay, yeah. All these services obviously gives you the ability to instantiate into a cloud database. And so no matter where the backup is coming from on-premises, from the recovery database, from the recovery appliance, etc., those can be restored into a cloud database instance. Can you click next? I think at this point we're done. Yes. Here you have a set of links that I think should be posted in the chat as well for you to copy to find more information. All the services that I mentioned have their own websites. So you have the recovery appliance, the recovery service, database backup, cloud service, Oracle Secure Backup. And the last one is a pointer to the Backup and Recovery Technologies blog, where you can find blogs going into more details on some of the things we mentioned today, and obviously where we'll also post new things in the future. I think that's all. We probably use that. Yeah, we use most of the time, and maybe we can spend a few more minutes if there are questions. Can you click next, Tim? I think the Q&A page.
Yeah. Thanks, Marco.
Okay.
Wondering if Kelly or Alex can post the product resource links that we just showed on the chat as well.
Yeah, I think Kelly posted it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see. See the
or
website.
Not this one. Okay,
correct. Yeah, the last slide.
Yeah.
Okay. So just taking a look at the Q&A, there's been a few Q&As actually that have already been answered here. Don't see anything open at this point, but anything that Marco, you want to highlight from the Q&A, or Alex? I see both of you.
Yeah, no, the only one I can expand a little bit is that question about offloading backups to third-party storage devices other than tape, NFS mount on the ZDLRA from data domain. I can expand a little bit more on this. No, NFS is not a valid destination, cannot be used on ZDLRA as a target to store backups. There is only one case when NFS can be mounted on ZDLRA, and we support it. It's to ingest backup that you may have existing backups, as when you implement a new ZDLRA, you can mount an NFS, and the ZDLRA will ingest those backups. But that's the only supported way of using an NFS share mounted on ZDLRA. It's not supported to use it as a target to send data from ZDLRA to the NFS mount. So if you want to use a third-party storage devices, so one option is, as I think Alex was mentioning, you can install a third-party backup application, like Veritas or Net Backup. The other thing I wanted to mention, if it's specifically related to data domain, you can configure data domain as a VTL, as a virtual tape library. you use an emulation that is supported by Oracle Secure Backup, so you can check on the OSB support metrics what emulations are supported as VTLs on data domain. And at that point, from a recovery appliance perspective, it would just be accessed and used like a regular tape library, right? The ZDLRA and OSB would not know that it's a data domain, but it's a valid way of sending backup from ZDLRA to data domain.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Marco.
Go ahead. Can you elaborate? There was a question just that popped up again about the backup recovery speeds and feeds, and what's the difference between the typical RMAN L0, L1 recovery versus recovery appliance?
Oh, yeah, sure. So when we talk about recovery appliance performance, there's two aspects. One is the technology we use for backups, which is incremental forever. So you never take a level 0 full backup anymore in this case. So you're really gated, if you think about it, by just the changes or the change rate of the database. So every day you do an incremental, it just captures that day's worth of data changes for the database. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is the network connectivity available from the system. We support 10 or 25 gig network connectivity. We feature 2 compute servers in recovery appliance rack, and each compute has 2 cards, or 2 network cards. They can be, like I said, configured 10 or 25 gig. Each of the cards and their ports can be bonded, so you can actually have 2 by 10 or 2 by 25 gig for ingest and restore purposes, times 2 cards, which means the maximum we can have is 4 by 25 gig aggregate network bandwidth into and out of the recovery appliance. So those 2 things together give us quite a big advantage compared to other backup solutions. We believe we're at the leading edge of all the network, kind of performance and hardware that we can use, as well as with the disk drive technology that we have too. One full rack of our system can support 1.2 petabytes worth of usable backups, and again, that's after incremental forever and then the compression that's used on the system.
Do you also want to cover the new one that came up, Tim, about, can you talk about how restore recovery will be faster and compare with traditional RMAN backup recovery?
Yeah, so virtual fulls, yeah. So for that aspect, the recovery from recovery appliance is different than traditional recovery with RMAN. Traditional recovery with RMAN has to do with restoring a level 0 and then restoring and applying all the incremental backups in succession to recover those data files to the desired time. Right? So that incremental restore and apply time can be quite significant with a lot of changes like that were done. With recovery appliance, that incremental restore and apply time no longer exists. The recovery appliance has a virtual full that it is aware of, and so when it's requested by RMAN, it will build a physical full backup on demand from the virtual full. So actually assemble all the needed data file blocks from the previous incrementals and from the level 0, the initial level 0, whenever it was taken, before, and return back a physical full backup set that can then be used for log-based recovery. So you no longer need the incremental phase, and we believe that definitely has a big impact to reduce the recovery time. All right.
Okay, I don't see other questions unless anyone wants to unmute.
Yeah, let's see. There's one open question here. Oh, okay, yeah, I just answered that. Great. Yeah, these are very good questions, and I see people are still in line even though we're over. We will be trying to have these sessions regularly throughout the year. These topics can vary quite widely across our portfolio, so use our question feedback section in our session page to give us ideas, to let us know what you're using, what you'd like to hear more of, especially with cloud becoming much more prominent in our world, and things that your company is looking at as well. We want to know what requirements you have for cloud environments and for data protection there. So with that said, I think we're closed all the open questions, and we can conclude this session.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.